Okay, so first of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today about the impact of the Sexual Offences Legal Advice Service to date. It's been great to hear from all of our speakers, in particular Amanda, who gave a very powerful account of her experience of the criminal justice system. And I think we can all learn a lot from that. And indeed, I don't intend to tell you too much about our service from my opinion, but rather the feedback we've received from victims, because that's the most important thing. And it is a victim focused service. So look, I don't have much time today. It's been such a packed schedule and a great conference so far. So I could talk about this service for hours, but I've been warned, and we obviously think it's a very valuable service, but we are, of course, completely biased in that regard. So the key consideration, as I say, to take into account when assessing the impact of the service is, of course, how it has helped victims. The criminal justice system is complex and involves many competing interests, but the victim support mantra of victim, victim, victim is always at the forefront of our minds. So first of all, I want to bring you up to speed with the SOLA service. Janice has briefly sort of given you background, but I feel I should give you a wee bit of additional context and explain some of the key aims of the project as well. Next, I want to spend a few minutes giving you examples of the impact of the SOLA service to date. That can be based partly on statistics, stakeholder feedback, but most importantly, as I say, it's on the words and experiences of victims who have used our service. Finally, I want to talk about the SOLA project in the future, how we hope to continue to have a positive impact on the experience of victims as we move forward. So just briefly to bring you up to speed with the SOLA service to date, and I don't intend to spend very much time rehearsing the ins and outs of how this service came into existence, because I want to primarily focus on the impact so far. So a wee bit of context that Janice has already run through. It's a service, it was one of the key recommendations, as Jerry said earlier, a game changer recommended in the Gillen Review. The pilot launched in April 2021. It runs for a period initially of 3 years. The purpose of the SOLA pilot scheme is to provide free, independent and confidential legal advice and advocacy to complainants in serious sexual offence cases. I'm one of 3 in-house sexual offences legal advisors based in victim support. We're all qualified solicitors with experience in criminal law and human rights. So to date, we've received over 1,000 referrals, which between the 3 of us, as you can imagine, keeps us pretty busy. So this is a groundbreaking pilot. Never before in this jurisdiction has there been a separate independent legal advice service for victims from the point at which the victim is considering reporting a crime right up to the point of trial. As we've heard so far, the criminal justice process can be daunting, confusing and frustrating for victims. Fear and uncertainty can lead to victims withdrawing from the process or being put off from reporting an offence in the first place. This is where we come in to provide advice and guidance which helps protect the rights and interests of victims throughout the process. So in other words, victims now have someone in their corner. So I just want to turn to talk about the positive impact of the service to date. The SOLA service has a number of key aims. I'm going to run through each of these. The first one is improving the experience of and support available to complainants of serious sexual offences going through the criminal justice system. So the most important feedback in this regard is from clients. We seek and receive regular feedback from clients with regard to whether they find our service valuable and whether it improves their experience of the criminal justice system. Currently, we receive verbal and written feedback, which we record. Looking ahead, plans are in the works to issue a client satisfaction survey to service users so we can gauge that more accurately. So why is it important to improve the experience and support available to victims of this type of crime? So rather than me telling you, here are the quotes from victims giving feedback on the service. I was scared to come forward, but now I'm going to report what happened. Thanks again. You've been amazing. You talked to me in layman's terms and let me see through the jargon. You've always been there. It's beneficial to get the view of a professional and showing me my options and making my ultimate decision. I have to give credit to my colleagues because these quotes don't necessarily relate to one of us. Those are feedback to other members of the team. So improving the experience and the support available to victims is the goal, but the side effect of this is a reduction in attrition rates, more victims coming forward to report offences, and better engagement throughout the process. So to give an indication of the problem, and Jerry has touched on these figures already, but the figures that I have to hand are only 1 in 6 victims of sexual assaults. And these are England and Wales figures from 2016. Only 1 in 6 victims of sexual assault report to police, and of those who venture into the criminal justice system, around 40% drop out. So the impact that we're proud of is that 80% of referrals engage with the service, and as time moves on, the impact that we have in terms of attrition rates will become a bit more easily measurable. Just because these things can take, obviously, we've heard how long that this process can take, so it can be difficult to measure the exact impact we had in these early days. Now, just very briefly, in terms of our other aims, we provide legal advice and advocacy. This is a really hot topic at the minute with regard to Article 8, the right to privacy. This includes issues around third-party disclosure, including medical and counselling records, which we've talked about today, as well as any personal digital information. So that can include phone records. It's an area which, as we've heard, is increasingly important. It's important that victims are informed of their rights in this regard. We often advise victims at the outset what consent they're going to be asked to provide. And that's really important because people do feel pressured into consenting. When someone asks them to sign something after such a traumatic experience, they are inclined to sign whatever they have to get the process over and done with. But we advise them about that consent, about what material is likely to be relevant or of probative value, and a bit more about disclosure obligations. So here are some of the concerns that we generally encounter in the form of quotes from victims. So it's the first one there is, I was worried that all of my notes from my counselling sessions were going to be handed over to him, that's the offender, for him and his team to read over. That's a weight off my shoulders. That person had obviously been advised that not all of the notes, it's the relevant bits can be handed over as part of disclosure to the defence. The next one, my whole life is on my phone, so I didn't want their lawyers reading over all my messages. It's not like I have anything to hide, but it's good to know they only get what they need. So the reassurance about how the process for disclosure works is valuable to clients, and sometimes that's half the battle in reassuring people that there is a process, and the PPS and the PSNI are very proficient in and adept at dealing with that, with their disclosure obligations. We can also make representations to the court as appropriate regarding disclosure if we feel that's necessary. So I can think of a number of examples where SOLAs have reduced delays and inefficiencies in the system, which can result from an incomplete understanding about the nature of the material being disclosed, but also of examples where we have made representations that disclosure must be kept to the minimum. So working with stakeholders and partners, that's another big part of our job. So while we are independent, we do work closely with organisations such as the PSNI, the PPS, and the SIST-NI, among others. There was a gap in the criminal justice system to represent the interests of victims in a system which is concerned primarily with the public interest and not necessarily any one individual. So there are, of course, limited resources available to these organisations, the PSNI, the PPS. Some things fall outside of their remit, and we reduce some of the burden for them and take responsibility for areas which may have previously fallen through the cracks. So that includes ongoing legal support and advice to make sure victims' rights and interests are represented. We liaise with the PSNI to keep victims updated, informed of their role, and informed of the role of the various parties within the criminal justice system. We attend meetings with the PPS and the victim as a support. We explain the contents of letters. Sometimes things are written in sort of legal jargon, and we're there to help explain things in terms that are easier to understand. The feedback from these organisations has been positive, and basically it fills a need that exists within the system, which was identified in the Gillen Review. So as I'm coming to close here, I think this quote helps to sum up I suppose the feelings of someone who has been through this process. Trying to negotiate my way through the criminal justice system is far from easy and often felt like a lonely place to be, especially when I learned that I was merely a witness for the prosecution and didn't have any legal representation. Being referred to you gave me some hope, and your pleasant, kind and understanding manner quickly put me at ease and allowed me to feel I could put my trust in you, something I don't always find easy to do. Having the benefit of your expertise and feeling genuinely supported by you really did make a big difference for me. So final thoughts very quickly, and I know we're pressed for time. We're in the midst of a publicity campaign at the minute. We're trying to promote the service, shouting from the rooftops, and Donna and Teresa have been a big part of that. You may see the SOLA service advertised in the backs of buses and the backs of toilet doors and bars and restaurants on billboards. We're trying to get the word out there. We've spoken to over 120 different organisations trying to spread the word, and one of the other things we do is we gather data about the referrals we receive of victims, and we're particularly keen to reach out to marginalised or vulnerable communities. We're out and about doing talks all of the time as we seek to bring law to people rather than waiting for people to come knocking on the door of victim support. So our hope is for the future is that we'd be a more permanent fixture in the criminal justice system, and we could start to talk about ourselves as a project rather than a pilot. We want to get into court to represent the victim initially in preliminary hearings, and we also want to expand the scope of the service to include children so that we can assist as many people as possible. So we started this role 2 years ago, and like any projects of this nature, we wanted to change the world. And while we may not have changed the world, the feedback we've received is reassuring to us that we have provided a valuable service and are making a positive impact for victims. So long may that continue. Thanks.